Okay, afternoon everyone. I can still see some latecomers, stragglers joining us, but we'll let them do that as I do my brief introduction. Those that join late will not be missing too much, I suspect. Welcome everyone to today's lunchtime session. My name is Ali McInroy. I'm the Chief Exec at Technology Scotland, and it's through Technology Scotland and our friends at I4 and their partner ShotScope that we're bringing today's session to you, which is a conversation broadly on the topic of product and iteration, and using ShotScope and I4's development journey to highlight and illustrate that over the course of the next hour or so. So I mentioned my name's Ali McInroy. I lead an organisation called Technology Scotland. We are the industry association for Scotland's enabling technology sector. And underneath that umbrella, we run a number of networks, one of which is Product Design Scotland. And it's with that hat that I am pleased to welcome you to today's session, as I say, along with our friends at I4 and ShotScope. So Product Design Scotland is about a year and a half old now, and it was set up to support the product design sector in Scotland. And we at Technology Scotland, we were interested in creating such a group primarily for two reasons. One, we recognised that there is a vibrant product design sector in Scotland, and one that we felt was worth shouting about, so to speak. And secondly, we recognised the value of good design. At Technology Scotland, for several years that we've existed, we work, by definition, I suppose, with a lot of extremely innovative companies who are producing all sorts of amazing technologies in all sorts of different application areas. But too often we see technologies fail because they're simply not being delivered into viable, efficient, commercially successful products. And all too often this happens as a result of poor design execution and from a lack of understanding on how to move from a raw technology to a commercial product. So that was one of the main reasons, one of the main drivers for creating this network, was to facilitate the partnership, if you like, between technology and design, and to promote the value of design and increase the visibility of those who are operating within the supply chain in Scotland. We aim to highlight Scotland as a centre for good product design, and one of the great ways to do that is to hear directly from our partners and to hear about their journeys, their success stories. Their case studies are brilliant ways of highlighting the excellent work that's done in this area in Scotland. And that's why we're so pleased to partner, as I say, with I4 and ShotScope today, to learn more about their development journey, not just to hear about their successes, but to understand more about the decision-making processes that were made along the way. And hopefully that'll give you guys at home some insight that you'll be able to help you on your own development journeys in future. So the idea of this session is it's a fairly casual session, but also one that we would like to be as much as possible interactive as well. So just by a little bit of housekeeping, if I could draw your attention to a couple of Zoom functions, if you like. You will hopefully already have stumbled perhaps across the chat function. You will see some interesting links within there to some of the stuff that is being spoken about today, but also please use it to introduce yourselves and to engage in conversation. And also the Q&A function as well. If you could use the Q&A to submit any questions that you would like of our panelists, then that would be the best way to do that as well. So that's it from me, just a very brief introduction, as I say. Thank you all again for joining today's session. I hope you guys find it both informative and entertaining. I'm promised that maybe something along a Monty Python 4 Yorkshireman sketch, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass you over to Linda Marie, Marketing Manager at I4, who's going to take you through the rest of today's session. Over to you, Linda.
Hi, thanks, Ali. I'm actually experiencing internet problems, so I'm going to be very brief, and I might have to remove myself from video to kind of get this going. But we define innovation as a creative thought, an idea that we then use to push forward a process for improvement. And innovation can be disruptive, and it can be iterative. In product design, innovation is applying this idea into a tangible item that then meets a market's unarticulated needs. This is a high-level, often aspirational definition. But what does innovation look like on a budget? And how do you just transform this creative thought into a vision into then a tangible item, when in reality, you can't do everything yourself. And what happens when you need to compromise your vision for now so that you can take a product to market? These are just some of the questions that we hope to answer for you today. But most importantly, we aim to give you an inside look and answer your questions that you might have about a relationship between an innovator and a product design, a client and a consultancy. So thank you for joining. In the chat, we have links to discovery calls with Tristan from i4 Product Design, to the ShotScope case study that we put together for our wonderful client joining us here today, and also to their website, ShotScope. And then let's get started. So 17 years ago, Brian Combe founded i4 Product Design with panelist Ewan Maxwell and 2 other founders. He is joined today by David Hunter, CEO of ShotScope Technologies and creator of the ShotScope GPS Sports Watch. And with him is CTO of ShotScope, Lewis Allison. Brian, I'm going to hand this over to you now. In preparing for this chat, you told me a very interesting story about how you and David met and this began this partnership. Before you tell us that, can you give us a little bit of background about how you grew i4 Product Design from an idea to a viable business?
Thanks, Linda Marie. Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief. And we hadn't actually planned our new venture. It was more of a necessity with the previous company that we worked for actually went into liquidation, which was a bit of a sad story. So we found ourselves out of work, and I've always used the expression that we're essentially 4 blokes who were just trying to make a living. And that's pretty much how the company was formed, and it was December 2003. Now, the fortunate thing for us is that we managed to maintain 2 of the biggest customers from the previous company in Flymo and SKF. So the early years were pretty much, or certainly the early months were pretty much myself and Ewan were camped down at the R&D facility in Newton Aycliffe for Flymo, and Gordon and Jim, my other co-founders, they were essentially working from the offices of SKF. And one useful part of that is that obviously it was rent-free, which was extremely useful for a startup company. So things moved on from there, and then we eventually got to the point where we started to rent our own office. So we rented an office at the Edinburgh Technopole, which is up at the Bush Estate, part of the Edinburgh Science Triangle. And much of the revenue that we generated was from repeat business. And then throughout the years, our client base, it started to increase as we built up our reputation and a track record. And then all of a sudden we started to employ people and then moving to a bigger office, eventually taking up the entire top floor of the building that we started life as i4 in. And going through all that, we managed to survive the scare of the financial crisis in 2007 and 2008. And it was that year that I actually became MD of the company, which was 5 years after the company had been incorporated. So all of a sudden we started to become a proper grown-up company where we had employees, we had to think a lot more round about the detail of strategy, business development, processes. So we started to introduce a quality management system into the company, and all those sort of what I would say very functional aspects of the business. 2010 was essentially a pivotal year for us. We engaged Optos, our first medical customer. The company again grew, and in 2013 we moved to our current office, which gave us 3,300 square foot of space, where we now house our design studio, our electronics lab and prototyping capabilities. And we really went on from strength to strength from there, adding different disciplines to the team, in addition to the core expertise of mechanical and industrial design. So we've now got 21 staff, a 1.85 million turnover, it's been a lot of hard work, and it's brought many a sleepless night, but it has been in the main extremely rewarding experience.
And then in what year did you meet David?
Now there's a story. I met David just prior to the work on V1, so it was round about, I reckon, about 2013 early, and it was actually a bit of a false start, because I met David at a networking event at our company Lawyers MBM Commercial in Edinburgh, and this was, as I said, very much before V1 became a reality. David, I struck a conversation with David. He showed me some images of a crude prototype that he had, and an explanation of what he was intending to do. And I thought to myself, you know what, we can help him do that. So I gave him my best sales lines, and you know, I spoke to David many years later about that first encounter, and he couldn't even remember. So,
well, that's when I stop it and I say, David, introduce yourself and shot scope and tell us your first impressions of Brian.
So,
be careful,
yeah,
David.
I'm David Hunter from ShotScope, CEO and founder of ShotScope. If I'm honest, I can't remember the conversation, Brian, so I have to apologise straight away. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the people listening in can relate to that phase. You know, 2012 through to 2014, late 2012, I should say, was really when I started to try and get something up and running. And I had a number of ideas, but just trying to get something to the next phase has obviously got its challenges. So during that phase, I was like a networking machine. I think I was hitting a network event every second night at that point around my working hours. So to try and remember everybody I met was really difficult. But I do remember the second conversation I had with Brian, and that was very much myself and Lewis running back to try and get some good help on designing the V2, try and get some involvement from a product design company.
Sorry, can I clarify real quick? Lewis, let's introduce yourself real quick. But were you not partnered with Lewis at the time, or is this when you met him?
No, Lewis came, I mean, Lewis, Gavin and Jamie. So Lewis is our CTO at ShotScope. I'm sure he'll introduce himself now much better than I would. Lewis is our CTO, Gavin Deere is our commercial director, and Jamie Binning is our customer experience director. And although I founded the business in 2014, worked on it for a year, these guys are like co-founders. You know, these guys really, you mentioned about you can't do this on your own, and that is absolutely spot on. You know, we sat in a tiny little room up at King's Buildings at the start, and Lewis had came in from a good company. Lewis left a very good job to come and work with ShotScope, and I think he probably looked at this room, looked at the tech where it was, and went, "Oh my God, what have I done?"
David promised me a refined product, but it was just a bag of bits at that stage.
Oh yeah.
First day in the job, I thought, what have I done here?
Oh no! What had you left, Lewis, and what made you take that leap?
As David said, I'd worked for a company for 5 years, a good company in Edinburgh, designing aerospace and military kind of products, and I really wanted to see a consumer product. I'd been involved in projects that were 4 or 5 years from getting an end product out there, and I really wanted to get involved in a consumer product. I do play golf. I'm probably the worst golfer at ShotScope who actually plays golf, but that for me it wasn't really the golf aspect. It was building a consumer product, using my electronics expertise to actually see a consumer product, something that you can hold 2 years after you start. So the opportunity with ShotScope came along, met David, liked his vision for the company, liked his drive, his ambition. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
Great. And then, so when you got on the first day and you were like, oh, what have I started? What have I done? What made you stay there?
Well, I think the startup environment was really, it was good fun. It was, you were doing everything. I think, as David said, there was 3 or 4 of us in the very early days, and your skills are getting spread thin across lots of different areas of the business.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed, learning about lots of different things, volume manufacturing versus designing electronics, learning more about plastics, even the web design and the software design aspects of shot scopes. Obviously that's a, massive part of our business is obviously the apps and the back end software that prop up our shot tracking technology. The thing that the customer views their golf on. So I enjoyed getting involved in all the different aspects of the business, and I could see that David's idea for this watch that could track the RFID tags on top of the clubs was very innovative. There wasn't anything, and there still isn't anything that does exactly what ShotScope can actually do. There are competitors out there, but none of them do exactly what we do, which is automatically track your shots without, you don't have to press any buttons, you don't have to tap your golf club, you don't have to do anything manual. It just happens in the background. And I could see from David's vision that, that was, I could see that would be a real winner if we managed to package it into a nice looking product eventually.
So you guys joined forces and you worked on the version 1. At what point did you say, right, we need to get this to even closer to what we originally envisioned, if you had originally envisioned that, or if your vision kind of evolved along the way? And then when did you decide to take on a consultancy? And let's bring it back to how you and Brian met.
Yeah, I think one of the things we do really well at ShotScope is we're fairly agile, and we do an awful lot of research. So we sort of evolve as the customer demand for the product evolves. So what we had envisioned in 2015 when Lewis and myself started to work together was probably what we've just put out in our V3 product, which has just went live this month. But without the sort of evolution of the technology, which was our V1 technology, which proved a lot of the underlying tech, a lot of the electronics, embedded software, and also the mobile app and software that processes data. Without that, and then without the evolution into V2, which was really V1 was a good tech product, but a commercial product that it had its issues. We were learning how to solve some of these problems. Like Lewis said, there's nothing on the market that is done with our RFID and our ClubSense technology, what ShotScope has done. So there's no, you go and talk to a product design company about that, and they've never seen the technology that's embedded in the strap before. You go and talk to a manufacturer about that, even some very, very experienced manufacturers, they've never seen that type of technology. So you can go onto our website and you can actually see the antenna embedded in the strap. Lewis and I, when we were actually starting to work on V3, we sat in a room with the largest manufacturer in the world, tier 1 manufacturer, and they were absolutely blown away that this small company in Scotland had not only came up with this technology, but at that point had actually manufactured it into both a V1 and a V2 product. And at that point, I think we'd sold about 15,000 V2 products when we sat in a room with them. And they could see flaws in our V2 product, but they were absolutely blown away that we had taken this technology and we'd implemented it and delivered it to the market. There's heavy investments in that. There's a lot of R&D. There's a lot of trial and error. The investment that we've put in on tests and trials on some of that technology, it's never even seen the light of day, and we've sort of had to evolve it or rip it up or learn from it, is unreal. And we'd have killed some businesses that weren't fortunate enough to have good backing behind them. And then of course the V3 coming out, I think, and I'm sure Lewis would probably agree with us, when I sit and look at V3 anyway, it is the vision I had a way back 5 years ago, but without the evolution of that tech, we would never have got there, Lewis, I think.
So
absolutely.
So sorry, Brian, when you then met with David and you saw that the complication, particularly around the wrist, the band, because I know you also mentioned that to me. Did you initially feel like that was, as you were mentioning, a technology problem, or did you take it on with?
So the designs area there was we had a challenge. They were having manufacturing issues with putting the V1 together, but they were very clear on what those manufacturing issues were, and we had to try and come up with a design solution to avoid that, because they were getting dropout from manufacture. It was costly, and they were getting failures in the field. So, and that's what happens with an early product. So you have to move forward. You have to come up with new ideas to try and translate that into a successful product with minimal fallout from manufacture. So we looked at the problem. We looked at some of the technologies, molding materials that are available, and we sort of cemented an idea of how to achieve the end result, which we then developed with another partner in a molder. Myself and David went down to visit this molder and had a good conversation with them. I know it was high risk and a lot of sweat and tears went into it. We managed to succeed in achieving that in the V2. And the way we managed to do that, we then translated that and used it again, but improved it through the iteration process into the V3. So it's not something that you can say, eureka moment. It's not that type of thing. It's about working hard through the problems, trying to isolate the problems and work around the problems.
When you were handing over this vision, David, did you recognize right away that i4 product design would be able to meet this challenge, or did you shop around first? How did you know you made the right choice?
If Brian and you want to hear some of this story. I mean, by that stage, I'm an electronic design engineer by trade as well. So Lewis and I we've got similar backgrounds, and we had actually in our V1 had asked a poor graduate who'd done a very good job actually to try and help us design the product design element of V1, and we tried to keep it in house. And if I'm honest, we did probably better than we should have done there with our V1. It was not the right long-term decision, but we had financial resource. We only had a certain amount of financial resource that we could use and put out there, and that's one of the difficulties I think to understand that phase, because that's you're trying to build an in-house team, and we do our own electronics, we do our own embedded software, we do our own mobile app, and we've got a heavy back-end processing element to the whole technology. So you've got that expense there in-house, and then we were trying to find a way of doing our product design, and we tried to save money by doing it in-house, and it probably cost us money.
Let's talk about that for a second. How did that cost you money by trying to keep it in? Because obviously you were trying to save costs. What did your development team look like that actually ultimately led you to find a partner?
Yeah, so I mean, it was, in all honesty, the development team was, our graduate who was actually very good at SolidWorks. He learned it really quick, smart graduate, and he was using SolidWorks well. And it was actually Lewis and I we were trying to solve the problems. Lewis, I would say that Lewis and I both like to solve problems. Lewis is better at solving these type of problems than I am, I would say. But I think we're both got that mindset. So we were trying to direct them to solve the problem, and we were just, I personally, I like to go out and learn and understand different elements of technology, and that's now applied to finance and business as well. But we were just like, we're out there soaking up information to try and apply it to our V1 product. And it did work. But where it costs you is the minute you get into, we built 2,500 V1s. And the minute you got through the initial test phase of doing a dozen, or 20, you looked at it and went, okay, we could make this in a wee bit more volume. But see, once you started to try and build 1,000 using the design that was there, it was never going to work. And it just got longer and more expensive and had more failures. Yeah. So that was a very important learning process that we realised, right, the V2 product we would need help. Perfect. We can design the electronics in house. We've got the right, distributor partners there. So electronic distributors and suppliers of electronic components. We've got our in-house software team. We've got Lewis driving it. So we knew we could solve that part of the problem for V2 and make V2 a much better product. But we needed some external advice and help to get the right product design company. Now, I had been at a company in Livingston, an electronics design contractor, and I'd worked with probably 15 different companies over a space of 6 years, and we'd used an array of product design companies. One of the companies I actually designed the electronics for had actually used i4. So I'd sort of heard of i4, but I'd also heard the other competitors as well. And what Lewis and I did was, we went out and did it was very much an investigation, and went and sat with most of the product design companies, put the design on the table, seen what they had prior, got really the key one, and I'm sure Lewis would go into a wee bit more detail on the technical side there, was we put that overmolding of the flex antenna, so the PCB that does our club sense technology, and that process, the silicon overmold that Lewis and Ewan were talking about earlier, we put that in front of some of the product design companies. And actually the thing we were looking for is, yeah, that's easy, or, oh dear, that looks really interesting and difficult. See the companies that said, yeah, that's easy, we never went back to them.
Interesting.
We went and we knew how difficult that was.
I think the guys at I4, sorry, David, I think the guys at I4 were really, they did listen to us, when we spoke with you, and I think, some companies gave us lots of big presentations on products that they built. I4 they did a very small part of that, but on the whole, it was about listening to David and I's learnings from V1, our concerns about V2. So I think we liked that part of it. It was very much a partnership. We weren't completely handing over the whole design to I4. We were still doing the electronics in-house. So it was, once the project kicked off, we knew it was going to be a day-to-day working relationship. So it was important that we worked together, and yeah, I4 certainly listened, I would say. So I think that's important.
Brian, talk to us about that day-to-day relationship you had as a consultancy for the client. And I know you were getting ready to jump in there about when he mentioned some of the things that you had to address with V2. So go ahead and talk about that. What did it look like when you saw the proposal that they brought to you? Did you know, like, this would be a personal challenge professionally, or did you know that you could do it, but you want it to be cautious?
I think you're in dangerous water if you think you know everything. I think you know how to do everything. Every product that's brought to us has got a challenge to it, and that challenge can come in many different facets. It might be time, it might be functionality, it might be cost, reliability, whatever it is. You got to look at all of the criteria that this product is going to have to fulfill, and you're going to have to try and match the client's expectation for that. So as Lewis is saying there, the collaboration between the team, or making it into a team so it is a collaboration, is really, really important. There's no point in us going off and working on something, coming back and handing it over, and the guys look at it and go, that's not what we want. that's not going to get a good relationship going. So we try and work as closely as we can with our clients and build up that relationship, because as you heard there from David and Lewis, they're both very, very clever guys. They've got a lot of good ideas and they can problem solve. And as a design consultant, I like nothing better than working with people who've got that kind of mindset to take a challenge on, understand what the challenge is. It's not going to be easy, but then say, okay, how can we do that? And work with you to try and achieve something which is quite special at the end of the day. So the relationship we've got, and I think we've built up over the years, has been really good. It's one of these things where you always get to the end of a project and you go, all right, that's it, the relationship's over, but we try and keep in contact in the background there. But yeah, it's being one team is what I see as being very important during that process. The actual design challenges in this one, we hadn't seen anything quite like this before, but we had an inkling of a part that had been made before, but not actually how to achieve this particular problem, success with this particular problem. So there was a lot of thought process went into that, and that thought process is not just born from nothing. It's through years of experience, understanding how parts are manufactured, what options you've got, what solutions you can use, and also some material backgrounds for that as well. But you just draw on all your knowledge base, the years of experience, and you really concentrate on the target and come up with a solution that is viable.
Yeah, hope you don't mind if I can just come back in there. I mean, what Lewis and I really look for in our suppliers, especially when it's design, manufacturing, it's part of the product, is we want our suppliers to be an extension of the company. And really that's, I4 have been there for years. The minute we started to work on V2, I mean, I remember coming out of the meeting, Lewis turning around to me and saying, they're going to be the guys. And we still had maybe three to go and see at that point. And, and we've got when we work with a supplier, we've got a real refined process we go through at our end. And, once we got through that process and we'd done our second meetings, I4 were still the company to go and work with. And I've certainly, I would say they are now an extension of ShotScope, I would say, and that's how we view them.
Brian, that must be such a compliment to hear.
Well, it is, and thanks for that, David, because I think one of the biggest things that we've always pushed is trying to build up relationships with customers, and many times when I speak to potential customers, I say it's not a cheesy sales line, because there is a true desire there to build up long-term relationships, because ultimately we as a business are looking for longevity, and we're looking for customers to come back, you know, to be satisfied with what they've got from us, and come back another time, and also tell other companies as well of what a good job we've done.
Well, we have the design up on the screen, and I want to bring it back to the product iteration of this. So you had the version of the V1 and you're working on the version 2, what did you want to retain and what did you want to improve? And this audience to type in.
Yeah, I can take this one if you want. I think the thing that we wanted to retain was, so as you can see on the V1 didn't have a screen. So the V1 was very much proving our shot tracking technology. So the V1 did have the RFID antenna embedded inside the strap, which is completely unique. You know, there's not another watch that has the antenna inside a strap. Normally, in all smartwatches, all the electronics are inside the head of the watch. So, you know, the V1, V2, and the V3 all have the antenna inside the strap. So that's one thing that we wanted to maintain. We had to maintain that to be able to read the tags on top of the clubs from 10 centimeters away. So people with different grips, different swing styles, it would always pick up the tag. So that had to be retained. And that was, you know, there was a couple of other small things, you know, obviously the V1 had GPS to track where the shot was played. So the V2 had to have GPS as well, but we wanted to improve the GPS accuracy. So, you know, it was a change of GPS chip. And obviously the main addition with V2 was to, one, make it look more aesthetically pleasing, and two, add on an LCD, and that LCD had to be daylight readable. You know, it couldn't be, you know, like a mobile phone screen, which can often be very difficult to read in direct sunlight. It had to be daylight readable, and it had to last, you know, 8 to 10 hours out on the golf course, 2 rounds a day. So we kept the shot tracking technology, and that's kind of stayed constant throughout. But it was the addition of obviously the LCD and making it look a bit better as well.
And you also mentioned the scaling of it in the production. And so, you know, how did you go about producing, selecting a manufacturer and to keep that process competitive while also maintaining your budget and design?
Yeah, well, this is so we actually, we changed manufacturer at the start of, sort of halfway through V2 actually. With V2, our manufacturing was kind of split across multiple different places. The electronics were done in one place, the plastics were made somewhere else. And it all came together in a third place, and it was, for a small company like ourselves, it was difficult to manage. As David kind of alluded to earlier, we got introduced to one of the biggest manufacturers in the world who manufacture Fitbits. And we went down a process with those guys, and they were really excited by the product. But in the end, it just turned out that they were slightly too big for us. We were slightly too small for them. There just wasn't a good fit. And so we dropped them, and we found another supplier who was able to build the whole thing. So we didn't have to manage the sub-components as much. And I would recommend that to any other startup building a product. I would try and not try and build everything separately in separate factories. Try and get one factory who has all the expertise in-house, and try and do that. And it makes the, you know, it's maybe not as nice a story, but it makes life so much easier to have that all managed by the same supplier. So for example, say you get 1,000 housings which have a scratch on them. That doesn't have to come back via shot scope. That just has to go down, you know, to the other end of the factory and sorted out at the factory, rather than coming back via shot scope. It was we actually, you know, it's been an evolution of our supply chain management as well. You know, we used to have a very complex supply chain where all the bits were managed separately, and no individual supplier was at fault really. They were all good individual suppliers, the problem was that they were spread around, and it was very difficult to manage. If you were trying to say build, 20,000 of a product, and you had to order 20,000 of those things, 20,000 of those things. Now we can just place a purchase order for 20,000. So that has evolved as the company's evolved as well. We've now got a very good CEM, contract manufacturer in Malaysia.
Yeah, I think having that relationship with manufacturing, as well as you said, Bruce, building it up over time is great, and it does evolve. If you're a startup company, you don't have a lot of background behind you. The volumes you might be making might be quite low for a lot of contract manufacturers, so you do tend to have to look about to find somebody who will take on the project. And although the cost might be slightly higher, they will work with you to try and get there. But once you've evolved that and you go through to the next iteration, your volumes are starting to increase, then you really need to look again at another step up the ladder to get to somebody who can, as you say, take away the pain for you and having to manage all those elements. And certainly for V3, the contractor you guys found and worked with were very good. We helped in the negotiation around some of the manufacturing techniques and things with them, and found them very diligent guys. They worked very hard, always very keen to help. And I think that went pretty well.
So when you were then ready to evolve the V3 with David, did you take that into consideration in the design? Did that kind of hold you back a little bit to cut, to manage costs and relationships of what you have already accomplished with the V2?
Well, the V3, as I said, they moved to V3, and they knew, David knew from that point that he needed to get somebody who was more competent at the larger volumes, that was going to give them less difficulty in getting this quality of a product out to market. So they did a lot of work and research overseas on trips to visit certain companies, and they managed to find this contract manufacturer who have done a sterling job with them. From our point of view, I mean, apart from I4 bringing our core disciplines to the party to help out with the development, what we also see ourselves as the cement between the bricks. You've got technology, which you can class as a brick. Then you've got I4 as a consultancy, or the cement between that brick, and then manufacturing as another brick. If you don't have the cement between the two elements there, between the two bricks, your wall falls down. You really need to have that understanding and have a communication method to talk with a vendor on the level that they're at, and to try and help ease the problems that you will always have as you go through the development process. So I think, I4 we really do lend ourselves to being a solid cement to hold the parties together when we have difficulties, and try and help the communication between the different parties as well when it gets technical. Yeah,
it's also an interesting one, Ewan, in that when we did our V1, we didn't have the resources even to work with an I4 when we had our V1, and it was only with V2 we were at a stage as a company that we had the resources to even talk about any sort of volume manufacturing and to talk about a design that was up to volume manufacturing. And it was only somewhere between the early stage of V2 through to the initial, we sold 2,500 units in a 2-week pre-order of V2, and then that kept on going. And it was only when you got to the next phase of, say, 5,000 to 10,000 units that you realised the current manufacturing setup was never going to work well. Yeah. And it's really interesting, not only is, I think in Scotland we always talk a lot about the evolution of tech or designing tech, but it was not only the tech, but it was the relationships with the suppliers, whether that be the electronics or the suppliers, or the electronics component suppliers or a product design company. But it's also the relationship with your shareholders and your investors, and they've started to see, right, they can move this product along, they can evolve it. We trust you now. We're going to supply you with the resources to actually fly out and meet the right manufacturing partners, and because our manufacturing partner based in Malaysia, I see one or two of your questions are coming in about that in particular. Being based in Malaysia comes with its own expense of flying in and out of Malaysia and visiting these people and making sure they're right for the company. And there's just expenses that evolve along the way, that's all part of getting you to the end solution. And that also goes through marketing and other sides of the business as well. But a way back when we did V1, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Some of these contracts manufacturers they would have never spoke to us. Now, interestingly enough, I used to try and pitch saying we'll work with, and I genuinely believe that we would work 20, we'd go and speak to someone locally and say, oh, we'll put 20,000 units through this solution. And I did believe that. But the reality is they sit there on the other side and go, that would be nice. But the reality is if we did 1,000 units with you, that'd be fantastic, because they know. So I think when you go out to talk to the manufacturing partners locally about smaller volumes or proving a design, they sort of know that you'll be part of a phase and then you'll move on. And a lot of our suppliers, as we started to evolve, have actually said that to us. Our manufacturing suppliers, the beauty of design, if you get the right design partner, they can be there through the life of the business. But obviously your manufacturing partners may have to evolve along the way.
I mean, it's just so important that it's more than just a bottom line budget, isn't it? Especially during times like this. I want to reference that question that you just answered. It was from Gavin Birmingham. Thank you. The question was the choice of a manufacturer in Malaysia due to IP issues in China? And then Graham Cook from Nova, anyone who wants to jump in and answer this, was having multiple suppliers has often been justified by IP risk. What's the view on that?
Yeah. I mean,
I could probably answer there as well, David, if that's all right. Obviously, a lot of, I know a lot of companies are nervous about using China because of IP risks. A trend with modern products which kind of mitigates that risk is the fact that they have to download the official ShotScope app for the product to actually work. So a lot of the IP is not necessarily contained in the physical product. We're not kind of building a standalone product. To use a ShotScope, you have to connect it to our mobile app and go through the onboarding process. To view your data that you've collected on the golf course, you use our apps and our websites. So it's difficult to copy. So that mitigated that risk. So the China versus Malaysia thing, to answer Gavin's question, was more really the communication with Malaysia has been absolutely fantastic, and we do have suppliers in China, but they're actually managed by the project managers in Malaysia on our behalf. And secondly, we had a recommendation for this particular company in Malaysia, SRX they're called, and we basically had a few recommendations, and we had some initial chats with them, and they turned out to be really good. And we visited them, as David said, and we had a look at their production line. And we like them. They've been very honest with us as well. They don't try and hide any problems from us, which is good. So it was a specific choice of manufacturer, first of all, and second of all, yeah, the communication with Malaysia is probably slightly easier than with China. And Graham's question about having multiple suppliers justifies IP risk. Yeah. Again, it comes back to it would be very hard to just replicate our physical product, and a replica ShotScope V3 just it wouldn't work unless you've got the official ShotScope mobile apps and our dashboards. So that kind of mitigates that risk for us.
I was once given a really good tip on IP. So obviously, I mean, the people who are joining this type of call are probably building more physical products, I would guess, just the nature of the conversation here. And obviously, a lot of those products now have tech in them that can go into apps or into software. I was given, as part of a Converge Challenge training course, actually, I was given this tip. I'm sure everybody knows the people who do the training. There was a guy called Alistair Minty, and he'd been involved in a camera vision company. And the way they built their IP was to create a weird mesh of IP. So you obviously have a patent portfolio that protects certain unique elements, but then you may have software that's in the device that's another level of protection. That software may talk to software in the cloud that's another level of protection. And then for them, they had certain data connected to all of that information. All that software didn't work unless you have the database. And effectively, that's, like Lewis described, all the different elements at ShotScope work exactly like that as well. We've got a database of 40,000 courses mapped meter by meter, and it's the whole package that works together, even though our patents lie with the product and all this club sense RFID technology we've been speaking about here. So, I mean, I think there's loads of ways to protect your product. An interesting one that can protect your product, trademarks, trademarking certain logos or if you're going to create a brand around each individual product, that can actually have a lot of protection with copycats to try and land things in the UK and in the USA. So there's loads of ways to protect your product, but I think a lot of investors will always ask for patents, and patents are obviously very expensive. And we do have patents at ShotScope, and that is definitely one route to go. But I think when you're looking at your IP portfolio, try and look at it a bit laterally and think about how many different ways you could protect it, or how many different ways you could safeguard it. Because if you're going to create a scaling business, and it's going to be a product business, you most likely are manufacturing in the Far East. So start very early on thinking about how you protect that IP as much as you can.
I want to go back to the chat real quick because we are approaching 10 till, and this is your last chance to kind of get in some few questions before we wrap it up. But Eileen has asked, and apologies, my internet was out, and I'm not sure if you'd answer this question, but how does your manufacturing partner take responsibility for type approvals, e.g. CE marking? And then after that, Amol has asked, how did you distinguish yourself from the big companies in the smartwatch space in terms of design, price, features, and IP?
Lewis, you want to take the CE one, and I'll do the other one.
Yeah, the CE one we actually do ourselves. So we control everything about the product. So down from the labeling to the packaging to, if something changes on the product, we'll know about it. So we take control of the CE marking and the FCC. We do that in the UK, primarily because it's easier to be there when that testing's getting done. So yeah, we do that ourselves. But I know there are manufacturers that will do it for you, but we very much like to control everything about the product. So yeah, we do the CE marking ourselves.
I think when you've got that knowledge, Lewis, of the product, you've got that knowledge of the product, and for you to hand that over, you have to hand a lot of the knowledge of the product over to somebody else to do that. When you've got all the knowledge of the product, going through that CE marking process must be a lot easier to do yourself.
Yeah, the CE marking, obviously there's radios in the product. You have to have the electronics knowledge of how to put the watch into the special test modes and things like that. So if you were outsourcing the electronics, they would probably take care of it. So typically the CE marking and the FCC marking would be done by whoever's designing the electronics. So if we design the electronics, so we handle the CE marking, but if your supplier's designing the electronics, they'll probably take care of it.
Yeah, so I would also say, I think it'd be fair to say that our manufacturing partners have also helped out in a lot of the plastics areas with, providing you all the details and information you needed to actually go and put the CE and the FCC across. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. You've got to find out all the, you've got to get all the flammability ratings and the data sheet and the manufacturers of the actual plastics that are being fed into the injection mold machines to get your pass mark.
Yeah. What about sorry, Linda, we're a wee bit off on some stuff here, but what about the timing of FCC and CE, Lewis? How does that always fit into our project plans?
It's always done in plenty of time, David. I don't know what you're alluding to. No, I mean, as with any startup, you're right. Your software is coming down to the wire, and software is involved in the FCC testing as well. So yeah, I think we landed the V3 FCC certificates. I think it was like a week before we shipped the product, so that was a bit scary, but we got it done in time. And hopefully in the future it's not as frantic as that.
Yeah,
but Rowan, sorry, did I cut you off, Lewis? I just wanted to get this chat in. Rowan has asked, how useful was it to have I4 PD at your doorstep, and would it be more difficult if design consultants were further afield? And I just want to make sure that we did answer Amol's question as well. And final question, because it's now 10 till, so we will be wrapping up soon, so let's get them in there.
It would be very difficult to not have I4 on your doorstep, to be honest. The ShotScope office is a 15-minute drive away. With a physical product like ShotScope, it is very useful to be able to sit in a room with you and the design team and kind of feel different products, look at different things, and explain the way it all comes together. Yes, it would be very difficult to use someone overseas for the actual industrial design, in my opinion.
It's interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that, Lewis, as well, and you're absolutely right. There's nothing like sitting across the table from someone, but we have customers that the design team have never actually met We developed
Right.
a product for a company in Northern Ireland over a 12-month development cycle, and not one time did they actually visit us. And that was through a full injection mold, over-molded process on a remote control for an overhead gantry. So, but I absolutely agree with you, Lewis, is that, you know, there's nothing like sitting across the table from someone.
Yeah, I think it really helps with the idea side of things, and you know, little bits of paper or sitting in front of a computer screen just thrashing out things. I mean, Ewan and Lewis must have spent hours in front of Ewan's PC just working through some of the tiny little details on the V3.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying about the collaboration thing. It's so important to have that good communication, and that closeness allowed this, you know, a timely manner, because it was a tight timeline for everything. It was good to have that access to communication with Lewis, and for him to be able to drop in on this was brilliant. He could put over his points very clearly and show us items and talk us through the necessities, for the changes that we had to implement into the design. So
we've got Brendan asking, if you have taken external investment, what TRL have you found made the difference? And then Rowan has said, thank you for the answer to that.
Cool.
Do I need to repeat the question then?
I don't think I know what TRL means.
Brendan, if you are listening.
Technology readiness level, David.
What was that?
Technology
readiness level. Okay. Thanks, Brian. You know, there's so many things. I think, same again, in Scotland, we'll always focus on, so personally, I think Scotland's amazing. I think we build some of the best technology in the world here. You know, from medtech to technology. So a lot of the technology we produce could be large, could easily go into the consumer market and be very, very successful. But I think sometimes we worry about, can we commercialise this? Do we have the skills here? And in a lot of ways, we're right to worry. It's only recently that we've had an awful lot of people have a lot of success. You know, some of the larger companies are like your Sky Scanners, your FanDuels. But see, in between those type of companies, all the way down to startup, we now have this rich wealth of knowledge and information about early stage companies in Scotland. And that's technology, that's business, that's software development, manufacturing, it's fundraising. And we also have a really good fundraising network, and a lot of the angels and a lot of the a lot of grant funding for smart technology. And I think sometimes we, as innovators and people who build technology, can think the technology has to be here before we raise money. And there is an element of that. There's definitely an element of that. But I would argue more that sometimes the business has to be there before the technology. So if you've got the technology at a certain stage, but you've not got the team, then that's not going to work for an investor. If you've not got the IP in place, or you've not got maybe your financial processes in place, or you've not got a wider support network in place, you know, these are all issues. So yeah, the technology has to have evolved. But I think if you can portray that you've proven a tiny little bit of the technology, and you've got a vision, and you've got the right people around you, whether that's directly through a team or indirectly through people like I4 and maybe advisors in business, I think that's more a, I think investors will look at the full package rather than just look at the tech. And I think in Scotland, we can sometimes get a wee bit caught up with that. You know, the technology is extremely, extremely important. If you've got the best tech, you've got the best team, you've got the best suppliers and the best support network around you, you know, that's an opportunity for success. But it's more than just the tech. And certainly my experience of raising investment is that it's the package that they look for foremost. And, you know, I'm very fortunate. I can sit in a room and I can pitch Lewis, I can pitch Gavin, our commercial director, I can pitch Jamie, our customer experience director, and these guys in themselves have got a tremendous vision for the short scope element. So obviously Lewis is looking at products, Gavin's looking at the commercial element and market and scaling the business, Jamie's looking for that rich customer experience. You know, so you know, there's 4 different ways, including my own vision, I can pitch the company that'll probably help raise investment, because they all tick the box. But you know, what I would say is spend a lot of money on coffee, when you're at the really early stages, go network like hell, buy loads of coffees, and just be careful about when you ask for the investment. I would portray the vision for the company. If you're on your own, or there's a couple of years, I would portray the vision for the company. see a bit of the reaction, ask a lot of questions of that particular investor. You know, what does good look like for you? What sort of milestones will you look for us to achieve, to allow us to allow you to invest in the company? And now the beauty, if you're sitting doing that investigative stage over a cup of coffee, and they keep on saying tick, 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 because you're at a certain stage, at the end of it, you can ask, well, would you invest in the company? But be very careful. You know, I think a lot of startup companies go chasing the investment and they're not quite ready for it. Instead of chasing it, you should just be using it as a network tool. And the best network tool is, I would love to buy you a coffee, or buy you a coffee over Zoom at the moment, I guess. But yeah, I mean, investment's a funny one. You know, certain ideas get investment just from the idea. I don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of people who have worked really hard over 12, 18 months. They've got some grant financing. They've started to put a team together. They've started to prove the technology. And actually, then they raise money. I mean, we got very lucky. Our first £25,000 was through a pitch when I had nothing for the product. I had a really good presentation, flew down to London, did a presentation, and we won the Sports Innovation Competition in 2013. And I hadn't started to work on the tech at all. And if I'm honest, there was an element of panic at that point that then came behind that, because you'd got the funding, and there was still a lot of work to get the funding into the company, but you know, we had nothing there. But fast forward, by the time we actually raised investment in 2015, Lewis, Gavin, Jamie were in the team with the financial director. We started to build a board. We'd actually raised about £200,000 in grant funding, and had a little bit more grant funding on the way. We started to have external partners in place. Lewis had actually done an outrageously good job in 6 months starting to prove the tech for a commercial product. And, you know, that's when we took our first investment, and it was much better for the company. It was much better with regards to the valuation of the company and the terms, because we'd taken it at that point. But that is difficult. I know it's really difficult, that early phase, but you've got to hustle. You've got to hustle lots to get it to that point, and you know, start to get people involved in it along the way.
You mentioned a good point that the technology doesn't always come before the investment. And Brian, I4 Product Design is actually leading that with a feasibility study that they just got on energy harvesting. Do you want to talk about that a wee bit before we close out?
Yeah, I can. I mean, we've got a really exciting project. We've just won a Smart Scotland award to develop or for a feasibility in energy harvesting for batteryless product design. And for a company who predominantly for us over the years have had core expertise in mechanical and industrial design, the actual thought of our in-house electronics engineer taking the lead on this project, for me personally, is really exciting. It's doing something that, you know, traditionally we might not have done, and it just sort of shows a little bit of, you know, how we've developed as a company and how we've grown up over the years, just to offer a little bit more multidisciplinary type service, rather to, as I said, our core expertise in mechanical and industrial design. So yeah, very excited, and I'm sure there'll be some publicity on our social media channels over the coming months and years, and hopefully showing some success in that.
And it's already started. Wrapping up, I did want to say one more thing. Mike Newland has said, fantastic product guys to ShotScope, and then the design is great. Just wanted to say that the way you and I4PD have worked together is the type of collaboration.
Oh,
perfect collaboration.
I think just quickly before we go, I'm always questioning, I don't think we addressed it directly. We almost got there, but yeah. I'm always question was, how did we distinguish ourselves from the big companies in the smartwatch space? Our main focus is around golf, so we've really picked our niche, which is golf. It's a pretty big niche, golf, but that's how we've distinguished ourselves. You know, obviously Garmin is a competitor, but they don't have the shot tracking technology that we have. So it's really based on features and around the shot tracking technology. That's how we've distinguished ourselves from the market. Would you agree with that, David?
Yeah, definitely. That's I think certainly in the early days, a lot of people were asking the question, how are you going to compete with a big company like Garmin? And by the way, Garmin are still the largest in this segment. We are, I think with the V3, we're hot in the heels, especially in the UK at the moment. And we're making massive inroads in the USA in very, very short period of time. But yeah, they are such a big company from afar. When you're starting out as 4 people in a room way back in 2015, people just don't believe that you can catch them and sort of build something that's more innovative than what they've got. What I would say is, small teams of smart people with the right backing and the right sort of advisors around them, the right support network around them. Yeah, you're agile enough, you're quick enough, you can adapt very, very fast, and you can actually, sort of jump past them on the technology point of view. You might have to catch up with them on sales and channels and things like that, but certainly on the technology, in Scotland, there's a lot of very, very clever people that have opportunities to build something that really could compete with some interesting companies around the world.
Yeah. So my point is that we're very focused on, and that's how on golf, and that's how we distinguish ourselves. We could take this technology and apply it to running, to cycling, to weightlifting, to loads of different things, but we've decided at this moment in time to be very focused on golf and become the best golf watch manufacturer. So that's how that's how we distinguish ourselves.
Absolutely, Lewis. I think that's very much the case, and the product and the technology that's embedded in the product really really sells it along that line. I think to take Garmin on at their own game, it'd be very hard to get traction in that market unless you have unique selling points, and that's exactly what you guys have managed to achieve. So it's been a great success for you. And
just to round off, Linda Marie is unfortunately being kicked off with her internet issues. So we've had an excellent comment in from Graham Cook, which says, I'm sure that the cloud service is more robust than Garmin. So there's another competitive advantage for you.
Yeah, touch wood.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't like to comment on that one, I'm afraid. Pass over that one.
Well, we're fine. Being small sometimes has its benefits, that's for sure. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining as panelists. Thanks very much for your insights today. And also to all our attendees for your excellent questions. We as I4 are going to be planning to do lots more of these inside looks into some collaborations with our customers. And there'll also be some excellent seminars from Product Design Scotland on other design insights. So yeah, if you'd like to keep on the mailing list for Technology Scotland, I'm sure we'll keep you up to date with that. So thanks very much, everyone, and we'll leave it there. Enjoy your day.
Thank you for attending, guys. Much appreciated.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks,
Cheers,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.